Kash Patel, former Deputy Director of National Intel and former DOD Chief of Staff. Kash, great to see you. Thank you for being here. I want to start with a soundbite of General Jack Keane, who I know you and I both respect quite a bit. He kind of outlined the real crux of the foreign policy challenge that President-elect Trump has right now. Roll tape and I'll get your reaction.
I think what President Trump is really facing, the major strategic shift that he'll experience in the 4 years he's been out of office, is the fact that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are colluding and cooperating and coordinating together. And they become so much more aggressive and assertive. But I think what the American people had in mind, one of the things is to restore strong American leadership on a world stage.
So what is the method? What will Donald Trump have to do in order to restore that image of America that might prevent conflicts in the near future?
Well, the good thing is President Trump already did it. He wound out of multiple world wars. And as you mentioned, he's the only president in modern history not to start a new one. And if the initial indications after the election are any indication of how it's going to be a very peaceful process. You know, he had a phone call with Vladimir Zelensky and already talked about winding down the Ukraine war. And he's already, discussed, had phone calls with multiple world leaders. But what you have to do is what President Trump already did. It's no secret. Prioritize the collection of intelligence against our adversaries to make sure that we defeat the threats, which is the Iranian mullahs and the #1 state sponsor of terror, and also make sure we keep in check the CCP and our Russian adversaries from attacking our cyber infrastructure. But you can't do that if your intelligence communities are prioritized against climate change and DEI. And President Trump made it clear. The priorities are the border, terrorists, bringing home hostages, and ending the forever wars. And I think that mandate will carry.
We'll talk about the bureaucracy, the defense bureaucracy and their DEI stuff and the problems it's having with recruitment, for example. But I want to go back to Iran. The maximum pressure campaign of the first Trump administration was very successful. It brought the mullahs to their knees economically, it prevented them from funding terrorism, it prevented them from working more on their nuclear program. Is the president immediately going to go back to the maximum pressure campaign against Iran?
The president will announce his campaign. I'll just tell you what worked. And I think it was a multitude of things. This full-on sanctions program against the Iranian economy to suffocate the mullahs from making money. I don't think the president's going to fork over another $7 billion like Harris did to them so they can start another world war. He's also going to talk to allies and adversaries about trade with Iran and have a global coalition, because we can't do it alone, to take on Iran and make sure they don't do one thing we can't have them do, which is achieve a nuclear bomb, which they're dangerously close to under the Biden-Harris administration. So these next 75 days are critical, because Iran's going to hyperspeed what they are currently working on, knowing that President Trump's coming in and knowing that his allies around the world are going to put Iran back in check. And I think you're going to see that playbook again.
Now, you talked about the president wanting to nothing more than peace, but doing it by strength, by the strength. It's the same message we heard from Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and it was successful then, may be successful now. I just want to play a little soundbite of President-elect Trump talking about that on Wednesday night. Roll it.
Want a strong and powerful military, and ideally we don't have to use it. We had no wars. 4 years we had no wars, except we defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS in record time, but we had no wars. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
So peace through strength, does that mean a major increase in defense spending?
I don't know if it necessarily means a major increase in defense spending, but it means a differentiated prioritization of where that money's going. And like you said, I don't think the Defense Department's going to be focused as their #1 priority is climate change and DEI and white rage. And I think once you take the funding mechanisms off of those priorities from the Harris-Biden administration and put it towards recruitment for forces in the Army and the Navy and elsewhere, I think you're going to see a growing number of people coming in to service this commander-in-chief, because they saw that he executed peace through strength, Middle East peace deals, brought home hostages, and diplomatically and intellectually wound out of Afghanistan, only to have it lit on fire by Biden and Harris. President Trump, you don't have to gamble on these things. He did it because he prioritized the intelligence and defense of this nation by allocating funds to where it needs to go, our men and women in uniform, and give them the tools they need to execute that mission. And only a commander-in-chief can dictate that policy.
Personnel is a big problem. It's not just recruitment. It's the number of seasoned veterans, of seasoned warriors who we lost as a result of these DEI. They didn't sign up for DEI. They didn't sign up to drag down their capacity to fight wars because of too many training seminars on DEI, et cetera. We lost some really good, seasoned people. How do you build that back?
Well, the great news is, my former colleagues at DOD, whether they're there or have left the administration, are excited about President Trump's return, and you can bring them all back. And President Trump has a plethora of individuals who are seasoned, as you say, to discuss, whether it's generals or chairmen or what have you, or just everyday operators and special forces guys. He knows that cadre and he knows that universe better than anybody. Remember, this guy took out Soleimani. He took out Baghdadi. He returned hostages peacefully from Iran multiple times over. I mean, people are lining up to serve this president as their commander-in-chief because they saw the power and wasta of him on the global stage without igniting the world into another world war. He's not the war hawk that these people made him out to be. Right. Proof is in the pudding. He had world peace, and I think he'll do it again fast.
I have to ask a simple, quick question. Will you have any role in the administration in terms of defense?
Look, it's been the honor of my lifetime to serve this president to this date, and whatever him and his beautiful team decide to do going forward, I'll answer the call anytime they make it.
Kash Patel, great to see you. Best of luck to you in the future. Thanks for being here.